EOS. I find many entrepreneurs have heard of EOS. Many of them know a little bit about it, but we go deep here with Craig Andrews and learn about the 5 foundational tools and the 6 key components of EOS.
Yeah, absolutely. We spent a good amount of time, Rich, on vision, traction, and healthy organizations, and how EOS can help entrepreneurs really create freedom from this thing called business. How can they have a process within their organization where they can really replace themselves in their role and have a system and team run the business for them?
And we even break down that, John, on the vision, traction, healthy, on what exactly are each of those and how can an entrepreneur get kickstarted in each of those areas. Here's Craig Andrews.
Today's episode is being brought to you by Financial Wing. Are your company's financials keeping you up at night? We all know that today's small to medium-sized businesses often overlook the fundamentals of accounting and financial operations. Our friends at Financial Wing can help with everything from bookkeeping, monthly closing and reporting, budget planning, and much, much more. Financial Wing's reliable and professional approach will quickly build your trust and turn your finances into an asset versus a liability. Go to financialwing.com/EU for your free 30-minute consultation and see what they can do for you.
Craig, welcome to the Entrepreneurs United podcast. We're happy to have you today.
Rich, thanks for having me, John. Enjoy it. Look forward to it.
Absolutely. And I know you and I met actually at a former podcast guest of ours, that person's retreat, and that would be Michael Alasso. We were on I think it was 2.5 days or 3-day retreat together was where last year we originally met up. So we have Michael Alasso in common. And happy to have you on and reconnect with you.
That was great. Great to meet you there at Michael's retreat. Michael is a great guy. And so, yeah, I'm a good company if I'm on a podcast with him.
Absolutely. I know you are an EOS implementer, and that would be a really easy way when people say, hey, what do you do for a living? Somebody says, I'm a firefighter. I'm an accountant. I'm an EOS implementer. That's like kind of a title that's probably vague to many people unless they have real experience with EOS. Can you describe what does that even mean? You're an EOS implementer.
So I'm an certified EOS implementer. And what I do is I help business owners and leadership teams get what they want from their business by teaching, mentoring, and coaching them a complete proven system, which is EOS, with simple tools that helps them get 3 things we call vision, traction, and healthy. Now, vision from the standpoint of getting all the leadership team and the ownership team 100% clear on the vision of the organization, where it's going, how it's going to get there. Traction from a standpoint is in getting everybody aligned initially with the leadership team and then with everyone else in the organization to execute, to achieve every part of the vision that's been established. And then healthy, making sure that the leadership team is healthy, cohesive, because oftentimes they've got great individual contributors on leadership teams, but they don't function well as a healthy, functional, cohesive team. Giving you the Reader's Digest version, that's what I do, all through teaching the proven system of EOS that Gino Wickman crafted some 17 years ago.
And when I had said EOS implementer, you had said certified EOS implementer. What's the difference between the two? Why is it important that you added certified?
There's different levels of implementers at EOS. So there's a professional implementer. That might be somebody that maybe is just starting as an EOS implementer, is doing roughly 40 sessions, full day sessions a year with a client. When you certify, would be doing over 50 sessions a year with clients, 50 session days. And there's even an expert classification where an implementer has done over 500 total session days with entrepreneurial leadership teams, teaching, mentoring, and coaching them on the EOS system.
And do you know where you are on total implementation days?
Yeah, I'm a little over 400.
Okay. So almost at that expert designation where you'd be able to say, I'm an expert EOS implementer.
Yeah, the designations are nice, but I think in the end, just as long as you can be a great implementer, professional implementer, and doing a great job for entrepreneurial leadership teams, teaching the EOS system purely. So it's nice to have that designation, but it doesn't necessarily guarantee, right, that you could get a great session from a professional implementer as well. So,
That's a great segue. You had said doing a great job for leadership teams. In
mhm.
your role when you're working on vision, traction, and health with a leadership team, how do you know you're doing a great job? How do you measure you're doing a great job?
When I look at the plan that they set, and they're the smartest people in the room. I make sure to tell the teams, listen, I'm just a dumb guy with a dry erase marker at the board. They know their businesses better than I ever could. They're in it every day. And so I'm there to, again, just to help give them the tools and system to use to be able to extract everything they want from the business. So when I look at their, what we call the VTO, the Vision Traction Organizer, their 2-page strategic plan, I really look at that and execution towards achieving that as, and getting, checking those things off 80% or better as execution. And I look at where they're at with their people and and look at their culture. And if if they're attracting the right employees, if they're getting more freedom from the business, because the business should be more manageable, Rich, more profitable, and more fun. If they're getting all three of those things, then I say, and that's my barometer of success, is hey, this is working, this team is working, and I'm just a small piece of that to help them get that. They're doing the work. I'm just bringing the system and tools to help them get that work done.
Yeah, I love that, Craig. I think Rich and I were talking about this just the other day, and I actually literally mentioned this yesterday. Actually, it wasn't the other day; it was yesterday. And I said to Rich, "There's a topic we haven't talked enough about on this podcast. We should really focus on that, and we're going to do that right now today because you just brought it up." One of my favorite books of all time was Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad Poor Dad, and Rich Dad Poor Dad says there's 4 assets you can build to create wealth and freedom in your life: businesses, real estate, stocks, and commodities. And what I was saying, and what he says, really, and I was just re-articulating, is that no one really buys one building and works 80 hours a week on that building, completely stressed out to build real estate wealth. Yet entrepreneurs get one business and they work 80 hours a week. They're completely stressed out. They go through ups and downs and left and right. And they never, not never, a lot of entrepreneurs are never really achieve the level of wealth and freedom that they meant to achieve by a business asset. They're stuck. They're stuck in the messy middle. They're stuck in the growth paradox. They're stuck. And you just hit the nail on the head. How can entrepreneurs achieve a level of freedom from this business asset they've created? And let's tie this directly now to EOS. How can you achieve? I guess what you're saying is if you have the vision, you have the traction, you have the healthiness of the team, the cohesiveness of the team, that's the pathway towards entrepreneurs creating something that can exist without them being involved in that business every single decision, every single moment, every single waking hour. Is that correct?
That's right. That's right. And what EOS, the beauty of EOS that I love about it, and I've been working with entrepreneurial teams for 40 years, is that it helps them build a scalable model. They have to recreate themselves. And true freedom, when I see an entrepreneur, is they don't have to be there. It's interesting. I worked with an entrepreneur for 10 years, and he was always in his business every day to make it go. I have to be there. I have to be there. And then by implementing EOS and using tools, getting the right people in the right seat, using those, creating a culture of high accountability, he was able to continue to do less in the business. And that doesn't mean, but he was looking at building other wealth, like you mentioned, Robert Kiyosaki's, that focus on some other interests and passions that he had. He really owned a business then. And
Yeah.
eventually, where he's there one day a week now. And he has a team that runs the business. Now he owns a business. And Gino talks about a lot. Sometimes people have a lifestyle business where I have to be there every day to make it go. I think a lot of physicians and dentists, single practitioners, that hey, if they're not there, the business doesn't go. Right? They
Yeah.
are the business. And getting a business that really has other employees that run the business, that's exciting. And that's what I think most entrepreneurs want, is that they want to be able to run that business without having to pull all the strings.
Yeah, exactly. Do you want to be a business runner or you want to be a business owner? Two different things,
Yeah.
completely different things. And I think a lot of people aspire to be a business owner, but get stuck in the business running and the business operating. And to your point, a lot of it is no one can do it as good as I could. I was the best sales rep. I was the best operations person. I was the best, but they don't know how to translate those skills. They don't know how to develop that and allow people to fail and grow and develop. And so all that has to be part of this team. And you said something about Rich asked you about the measurement. I think what I heard was on the traction level where you're aligned to execute on the goals. What you look for as a personal goal, or maybe it's an EOS goal, I'm not 100% sure, is you look for 80% execution on what they say they're going to do. Is that correct?
Yeah, because we're not into perfection because no team is perfect. But we feel US, if they're hitting 80% or better on those objectives that are set annually, quarterly, a little bit higher on a weekly basis. But if you're hitting those objectives at that pace, that's a good, healthy team, right? That
Yeah.
they're hitting because there's things that are happening that are out of our control. So we don't do perfection at EOS, right? Oh, we have to be perfect, you have to be 100%. No, 80% or better is a highly functioning team.
Yeah, and I would actually argue at 100%, not only you maybe you could claim you're perfect, but you're certainly not stretching yourself. If you're hitting
Right.
100%, your goals are probably too easy to attain and you need to stretch yourself. And 80% is probably that right number of feeling a level of success, but still striving for more and trying to grow. So that probably plays a factor. And I'm assuming the measure of creating freedom and giving a business owner everything they want out of a business is not necessarily an 80% or 90%, but it's more of, what that owner has as a goal and aspiration. Are you able to achieve that? That's probably the ultimate for you when you take a business owner who's stressed out working in their business all the time to 1 day a week, like you mentioned. I'm assuming that's the feeling of I made an impact
Yeah.
level for you, right? And that probably drives you in a big way.
Absolutely. One of the things that I think people miss is what's the personal vision of the owner or the leadership team, because that
Love that.
should drive all the business decisions. I'd ask an owner often, why are you going to launch that new location, or why are you going to get into that new product line? I need to. I said, really? Why? Let's look at your personal vision. Does it align? Are you going to be gone more from home? Yeah. Are you going to be working longer hours? Yeah. Is that part of your vision? No. I said, well, then why would you do it?
Yeah.
What's driving it?
Craig, I'm curious, and you may say it depends, and I'm putting you on the spot on a number here, but out of every 10 entrepreneurs that you meet that you're going to work with, how many of them have a personal vision plan, a true north of where they're trying to go versus I'm just trying to grow the business?
I'm going to say two to three. I
Two
think
to
it's
three
low.
do have it or don't have
Yeah,
it?
yeah. Two. Yeah, I would think in two to three. I'm sorry. Yes, two to three have it.
Yeah.
Two to three have it.
So
Out of
20 to
100, 2 to 3
30%.
Out of 10. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. Out
out
of
of 10.
10. So,
Okay.
so yeah, yeah.
So 20 to 30% of entrepreneurs you begin working with have a plan of where they're going themselves, which I 100% agree with you. That's the problem, right? Like
Yeah.
I'll give you an example. Rich knows it all too well. I was growing a business and I felt like in the end, I lost it all for a lot of reasons. And I woke myself up afterward going, I feel like I was growing for growth's sake. I was doing all these things. I really didn't have really a core purpose of what I was trying to achieve. I was trying to just achieve growth for the business because it looked good. I really didn't know where I was trying to go. And so that was a real wake up moment for me, a little too late. I think it's very important. So you run into the 70 to 80% that don't have a life vision, don't have a life plan. Is that part of your model to be like, hey, I can't even work with you yet because I don't even know what you're trying to achieve, let alone your business? And I'm assuming the EOS implementation system is for the business. What is the model you work with, or do you work with the entrepreneurs to say, look, we first got to work on your plan? Is there a model for that?
I do that. I incorporate that as part of my practice. It's not part of EOS per se,
Okay.
is what's the personal vision, but it comes out, right? Because we're trying to establish what the owner's vision is of the company. There has to be a foundation behind that. Why is he or she doing this in the business? What gain is to be after? And it sounds selfish, and I tell business owners, I mean, we get really granular. Like, what are those things you're after? Because those are measurements. Are we getting closer to those? And it's vision. We're not going to get it tomorrow or flip a switch, but we're getting closer by the business the decisions that we're getting. Maybe it's like, hey, I'm gone for 6 weeks a year from my business. That's one of my visions. And so, are we making good business decisions and helping us get to that and we get closer and closer to it every year? So I incorporate that. I have some things that I use to be able to get that personal vision out of the business owner. So then we just get the hand in glove when it comes to EOS.
Yeah, I love that. I love that you add that element to what you do, because if you just went in and helped the business achieve what they wanted to achieve without knowing what that owner really wants, and I must believe that 70 to 80%, and I would agree with that number, of entrepreneurs listening to this podcast may or may not have a personal life vision or plan. I know for me, Craig, what I've used that has worked wonders for me over the past few years is really the one thing methodology, right? What's
Mhm.
the one thing I want to achieve in 30 years? And what's the one thing I need to achieve in 10 years, 5 years, 1 year, this quarter, this week, today? What am I going to do this hour? I'm doing it right now with you, right? It aligns me to it. Is there a methodology that you would share for an entrepreneur listening to this going, hey, here's the best way to start? If you don't have, other than call me, which is another option, what would be something you'd recommend an entrepreneur do today to have clarity on what they want out of their business?
So there's some great tools, right? There's lots of great tools. I was introduced to some tools when I ran a peer group advisory business where I was put business owners on a board and ran a monthly board meetings. And we had some great tools there to help them define the vision, just pulling out similar to what you mentioned, John. Hey, what do I want to have in 30 years? But really getting what are some of my spiritual goals? What are some of my physical goals? What are some of my financial objectives that I want to get to? What are my family objectives? And then I just went through a series of questions, just ask kind of get down. What does that look like? What does a family situation look like? And then the vision changes, right? Because kids get older, the business matures. That vision is constantly in a state of flux. So we just keep looking at those. So there's various numbers of tools. I've got some tools that I'd be happy to send you or Rich that are just quick, easy Word docs, PDFs that allow people to get it out on paper. Hey, let me get some clarity around what it is I'm really after here with this business. And you mentioned a great. I'm going to give Pat Lencioni a shameless plug because he wrote a great article. I still have it. It's weathered, but it's like growth for growth's sake. That is the title of his article, right? And
Oh,
a big
really?
question mark. And yeah, it's a really great article. You should look that up because he talks about that, and it really grabbed my attention a few years ago. It was like because a lot of people do that. I have a great friend, an entrepreneur. He said, I have to grow. I have to grow 10% every year. I said, do you? There's other ways to grow. You don't have to grow to the top. I get it. Growth is important. But I said, there's other ways to grow in the business. But he finally changed his mind. Said, yeah, I don't always have to. I have to be building the top line. I have to be. Now it's important, right? I'm not advocating that you don't want to build and grow the business, but it's not everything, right? There's
Yeah.
other things.
Yeah, not only that, first of all, yes, please. We would love to have some of those tools that you're talking about and share them with our audience. I'm sure our audience would love that as well. So please and thank you. And the other part about growing for growth's sake is what entrepreneurs don't realize, and I realize too painfully, is if you grow beyond the ability that you can finance yourself, there's something called a self financeable growth rate. How fast can your company afford to grow?
Right?
If you try and grow beyond your skis of what you can actually finance yourself, guess what? Now you run out of cash. You run out of cash. Now you're looking for investors. Now you lose some of your equity. Now you lose some of your control. The next thing you know, it's you're going down the wrong path. So I appreciate you sharing that article. I'll definitely look that up. Rich, I'm curious. Have you ever been involved in an EOS implementation in terms of how exactly that works?
Not EOS implementation. I've been involved in implementing leadership team, organizational health, 4 disciplines, using the 5 dysfunctions, those type of things. I have EOS tools. I know a couple of our franchise owners have had an EOS implementer. I'm not sure certified or not, but have had an EOS implementer in to work on the health of their organization.
Hmm. It is pretty amazing that this was created 17 years ago, and now there's certified implementers going around. It's pretty amazing what they've done.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd love to know, Craig, if you could give a quick tip on the 3 things that you work with businesses on: vision, traction, and healthy. And the quick tip, and I'm happy to guide the conversation as I'm teeing it up, but Craig, I think in bullet points and in charts. So that's how my mind is going here. I'm thinking of a chart on the rows on the left hand side has vision, traction, healthy, and the columns left to are like, okay, what is it? How do you know when you're there? And how do you do that? What's the first step that an entrepreneur listener can do with it? So, if it's okay with you, I'd love to guide the conversation that way. And maybe we could start with vision and to say, what is a vision? How do you know when you're there? And what's the very first step somebody could take?
So for us, I mean, past the personal vision, we start into the business. The first thing that we do with establishing the vision is what are the core values of the organization? What does, for lack of a better term, what does that entrepreneurial leader and his team reek of, or her team reek of? And we have to establish those core values because and we take a team through a discovery process initially when they're starting out with EOS to get those set. Now, sometimes it's just a validation because the team already has them, but we want to validate them to make sure. And again, given a shameless plug to Pat Lencioni, right? He's got the values trap, which he wrote a great article for Harvard Business Review some years ago. Is that so staying out of the values trap because sometimes these core values are aspirational. Sometimes they're permission to play, and sometimes they just happen organically. That they just people throw some seeds out, like, oh, I think that's our culture. Let's see if the stuff grows. We're very deliberate. We have to be very deliberate. What are the core values? So we get those established. That's part of the vision. Who are we as people? We have to get that established. Who are we? And the second part of that is what's our core? What's our core focus? So what is our core focus of the business? What's our sweet spot? Where do we hit it out of the park the most? And this is more like Simon Sinek things is why do we get up in the morning? And this is creating cultures. Like why do we because really nobody cares that I'm an EOS implementer that much. But they care really more about why I do it. Why do I do it? And I think that's really important for all businesses. What's our core values? What do we stand for? Why do we get up in the morning? And then what's our niche? Right? And Orville Redenbacher, everybody knows what Orville Redenbacher's niche is, right? It's popcorn, right? There's nothing glamorous. Just say, what do you do? But it's more important that we always start with the why, too. It's like, why do we get up in the morning? That helps attract the right people to the organization. So when you talk about some things that we start off with first, we've got to get that established because that establishes culture for the organization. And you can't achieve a vision. There's no way that any entrepreneur will achieve their vision if they don't have the right people in the organization. Jim Collins stuff, right people, right seats. You've got to get them in there. And how do you do that? You have to have a culture. What are the core values? You have to hire, fire, reward, recognize, mostly reward and recognize around those core values so you can get the right people in the organization because we have to have those people in order to achieve the vision. And we get Gino I don't know if he coined it, but vision without traction is hallucination, right? So we've got to get the right people in order to achieve that vision, or we just can't hit those ceilings that John had mentioned before. Entrepreneurial teams are going to hit the ceiling, and they're going to be one of those statistics of the 50% that fail in the first year, and what is it, maybe even or 70%, and then 50% in 10 years are still going to fail. So those things are really important. We got to establish the culture, core values, core focus. That's where we start with creating this environment where that vision can be achieved. I don't
So
know
if
if that's
somebody
where you're
wanted,
going, but
yeah, that's great. If somebody wanted to take immediate action, if they go, wow, I listened to that podcast with Craig and who we are, the core values, the core focus, the niche, the why we do it, and that's all about the vision. And I really like what I heard. What do I do next if I want to take a first step?
at EOS, it's a law of abundance. So we share all these tools are available at the website is www.eosworldwide.com. They could go on the website and download the Vision Traction Organizer, which is that 2-page strategic plan. They can download these foundational tools from the 5 foundational tools that we really teach that are 80% of EOS, and then of course I would say get one of the books. My favorite book, I love Traction, which is Gino's first book that he wrote, but my favorite one is Get a Grip that Gino wrote with Mike Payton, who is also the former visionary of EOS. But that book, I love Get a Grip because that's what a lot of business owners are after. They want to get a grip on their business. And it's a story, a fable, written with an entrepreneurial leadership team that had struggles, were hitting the ceiling, took on EOS as a way to help them get all that they wanted from the business. And then how they had there's bumps in anything that you do, bumps in the road, and then they came out the other side a better, healthier, functional organization. So get that book.
Thank you for that. You said vision without traction is delusional. I think that's a great segue into what is traction? And then what's the first step that somebody could take with that?
Traction is achieving every part of the vision. So when that vision is set, we have that 2-page vision set, that the VTO. That's what we want to achieve. We've set that from who we are, where we're going, 3-year, 1-year, quarterly goals. We've set the vision. And so traction is achieving every part of that vision, executing. And that goes back into the foundational tools of EOS. So those tools are designed to help teams execute to achieve every part of the vision. And when we teach a team, we start out with these foundational tools because we want to teach them how to fish, and then we'll set vision. A lot of teams want to start out with, let's get the vision set. Let's get this big vision set, and then we'll figure out how we're going to hit it later. We take an opposite approach. Hey, we're going to teach you some foundational tools that are going to help you execute as a team. And then by the end of that 3 months that we're together, we'll also have established the vision, but you'll be mastering those foundational tools so you can hit the ground running. When the vision's established after those first 3 months, then great. Now we've got actual tools that we can execute on. We don't have to create the wheel. We don't have to try and create our own system. We've got, whether it's EOS or some other system, of course, I'm partial to EOS, but whatever system you use, we've got one. You got one that you can execute on. And so that's a different approach for EOS, is that we teach those tools first before we get the vision established.
And when you say foundational tools, I know you had mentioned the VTO. What are you referencing there when you say foundational tools? What's that?
So we have the Vision Traction Organizer. That's one of the foundational tools. The accountability chart is one of the foundational tools. Now, the accountability chart is different than an org chart. We're after functions that the organization needs, followed by clear responsibilities for that role, versus an org chart is about title. We're about function. So accountability chart. We also teach scorecard. For us, it's a very simplistic tool that allows the data component of EOS, one of the 6 key components of EOS, the data component to be strong, because it takes all the subjectivities, ego, personality out of the equation and just boils the organization down to good, hard data. What's the data say? And then we have the L10, what we call the L10 meeting pulse, which is we teach teams how to run an effective meeting. Rich, John, you've both been in meetings that they've been miserable. I've been in many of them too. We're like, what did we do? We just discussed and we didn't solve a thing. So we really get teams executing on, hey, we're going to have a very productive meeting, very focused meeting with an agenda. And we're going to hit on that and teach them how to execute on that continually. And to get that's going to just help them get that weekly traction that we're after. And then the last component of those 5 foundational tools is rocks. We get them focused on and we call rocks, they're quarterly objectives. So we can't do 23 things every quarter working towards our annual objectives. We teach them, hey, we're going to carve out the most important issues, 3 to 5 most important issues every quarter, and get really good at predicting. Because often what happens is entrepreneurial leadership teams aren't good at predicting. We want to get them good at predicting weekly, quarterly, annually, and then hitting 80 or better on those, right? If we're hitting 80 or better on what we're predicting during those time periods, that's going to be an executing team. They are going to be getting traction and execution towards the vision.
Wonderful. Thank you. So the 5 foundational tools, got those. And now, what about healthy? What is it to be healthy as a team? And what are some of the first steps to becoming healthy?
So open and honest, right? We're big about accountability, open and honest, right? We're not going to sweep things under the rug. And the big thing about healthy is that open, honest accountability. When we meet weekly, Rich, John, we're always measuring and inspecting the things that we had predicted the week before. So there's a high accountability. If I'm on a leadership team, Rich, and I look you in the eye and I say, Rich, I'm going to do that. I got that. I'm going to do that. And I'm going to come back to you in 7 days and I'm going to have that done. We start establishing this high level of accountability and that establishes health. Is that, hey, and if somebody's off track, we're going to help them, mentor, coach them, but we're also not going to sweep it under the rug. We're going to address our issues. We're going to get really good at addressing our issues. And we have issues weekly, quarterly, annually, but we're not going to hide from them. We're going to tackle the ugliest, most important ones first. So the health part comes in about establishing this high culture of accountability, of discipline and accountability. And a lot of that comes from Jim Collins too. He talks about how to creating a culture of discipline and accountability, and I'm paraphrasing there, but is so important. And that's what EOS does too. It's a high culture of discipline and accountability, and that's what adds to team health. And when you're implementing EOS and you're living it purely, is literally no place to hide because we have the vision clear. We've got the right people in the right seats. We've got great data with our scorecard. We're smoking out. There's just no place to hide there. If you're on that team, you have a role, you know what it is. The vision's clear. We've got data that shows we can execute on it, but then we're going to get really good at solving our issues. And we're going to solve those issues. And that just creates a healthy, functional, cohesive team. When I can sit down and talk to you about something that might not be hitting the mark like we talked about, and we work to improve it, right? That creates that healthy culture.
Thanks for that. You gave a couple of nods to Pat Lencioni, and obviously EOS is Gino Wickman. Are there other people in your practice that you find yourself particularly gravitating towards and blending in addition to Gino and Pat?
I think all of us that are EOS implementers, there's other thought leaders that certainly you never reach the top. When you come in an EOS implementer, you're constantly learning. And so anything Pat Lencioni, man, I read all his books just because we can't teach team health and organizational health better than Pat can. Jim Collins, a lot of his work. Gino was influenced a lot by Jim Collins. We continue to be influenced by his work. I think Dan Sullivan would probably be looked at as one of the best entrepreneurial coaches. A lot of his work, it's simple. And we as entrepreneurs, we need simple, right? Because we don't need anything complex. And that's a big thing for EOS as well. We want to keep things simple. And so Dan Sullivan, Dr. Benjamin Hardy, they've written some great books lately that are just outstanding for entrepreneurs. And Dan Sullivan's one of the best coaches for entrepreneurs that I think is. There's a lot of great coaches, but he's one of the great ones. So a lot of his work. And
Greg,
I can mention others.
I'm not familiar with Dan Sullivan as much as the others. What would be one of the books you'd recommend I pick up?
He's had a couple of great ones. I've just reread a couple of most recently is Who, Not How. And that kind of takes a little bit off of what Jim Collins talks about. It's who, right? Not how. So that talks a lot about getting people in the organization. It's the who. And he wrote a recent one that's 10x is better than 2x, right? 10 times. It's a kind of when you hear that, but it's a great book for entrepreneurs, right? Hey,
Yeah.
10 times is better than 2 times, right? And he talks a lot about concepts about how to get there. And the one that I read frequently is Gap versus Gain. The Gap versus the Gain.
Great.
Those are 3 great books that I really like from Dan Sullivan.
Thanks for sharing. Rich, have you read any of those?
No.
Me neither. Okay, awesome. You mentioned something about 6 key components of EOS, and then there's also 5 foundational tools. I think I got the 5 tools down, as did Rich, but I'm not sure if I got the 6 key components of EOS. So I just wanted to touch back on that.
Yeah. So when Gino devised and created and cobbled together EOS, he discovered that there's 6 key components to a business, and the strength that an entrepreneurial team has in this 6 key components tends to take care of those other 136 things that business owners tend to run into when they're running a business. So the first one is vision. We talked about that, and we've got some disciplines to help achieve that vision. So vision. People component. That's the second component of EOS. Is we've got to get the right people in the right seats, and mentioned a couple of things. The accountability chart. That's one of those foundational tools that helps us get the right people in the right seats. And right people is core values. That's on the VTO. Right seat is the accountability chart that helps us get the right people there. Helps us get that people component at 80% or better. Right. That comes back to that 80% or better. The next component is the data component. And I mentioned the scorecard. We've got to get where the organization is boiled down to hard numbers, no ambiguity, no subjectivity, no ego, personality. Hey, I'm working hard, John. Yeah, but Craig, what do the numbers say? We appreciate you working hard. It's not but we have to look at the numbers too, right? So we got to get that data component strong. So those are the three at the top. And all I mentioned, that smokes out issues. We're gonna smoke out issues at an organization, and we have them. And the fourth component of the six key is the issues list. We have to get really good at as entrepreneurs to solve our issues. You've probably seen many times where business owners are dealing with the same thing over again and again. They're getting their fannies kicked because they're having the same thing over and over again. With EOS, we're teaching that in level 10 media pulse. We're teaching them how to overcome their issues, to tee up them in the priority which they're impacting the business, and then solve them. Get good at solving. And then the fifth component is process. Now, Mike Payton and Lisa Gonzalez just wrote a great book, and one of the EOS, I think it's the most newest book with EOS, called Process. And to me, I'm passionate about that as well, because I see that being as one of the weakest links or the weakest component of the six, for me, at least with my entrepreneurial teams, is that we don't have our cookie cutter franchise prototype dialed in. We've got everybody doing it different ways. This office does it that way. Rich does it this way. And so we want to get away from that. And process component is getting them documented in a simple entrepreneurial fashion and getting everyone to follow them. And that's really a critical component to getting consistency with quality in an organization. And so that's the fifth component. The sixth key component is traction. Of course, right? Execution. Yep. We have to be executing. And how we execute is we're meeting. And we're meeting, we're setting good quality rocks, but we're always pulsing, checking on the business. We're meeting weekly, annually, quarterly. We're always checking, measuring our gains, what we need to do. And if we're strong and the leadership team is strong in those six key components, they're going to get those things that they're after. They're going to make that business more manageable, more profitable, more fun.
So I think I was able to track back a tool for each of the six components, but I may be missing one of the tools. Let me just validate. You got vision, and the primary EOS tool is a VTO.
That's
you got
correct.
people, the primary tool matches up with the accountability chart.
Correct.
You got data, that matches up with the scorecard.
Correct.
You've got issues, and you mentioned level 10 meetings that flush those out and problem solve. And then I'm missing, what's the tool on process?
So there's two tools on processes. One is document them. So we teach teams how to document in a simple entrepreneurial format, bullet pointed, written, getting all their core. And we start with core process first, Rich, is that the organization has a handful of core processes. So they have a handful of core processes. Sorry about that little alarm going off. But they have a handful of core processes that have to be documented. And we get those documented, and then that followed by all is the other component of process, where we get everyone in the organization following those core processes through training, measuring, inspecting, leading, managing, and holding the people accountable to those processes and updating. And that takes a long time. It's not something that overnight is going to happen with the team. But when that process component is strong, though, and we're measuring and inspecting what we expect, then that organization is going to get quality and consistency.
Got it. And then the last piece was traction, which it matches up on the quarterly rocks pretty well.
And meeting. Yeah, we're meeting. We were always meeting. So that's the one thing we're meeting. We have our meeting pulse weekly, quarterly, annually, and then establishing those good rocks for traction and execution on a quarterly basis.
Thanks.
Awesome. I appreciate you sharing all that. That really brings it tighter. And Rich, thanks for clarifying. I was matching up a little bit differently than you were, but that really helped with it. And I love what you said too. The first three kind of smokes out a lot of the issues, probably the 80-20 rule, right? The vision, people, and data, if you can really zero in on those. So when you work with an organization, if I'm thinking about this going, okay, you know what, this would be really good for my organization. And when you say you have 400 client sessions, client days, maybe is the right way to put it. I'm assuming that to implement this, to train it, have the accountability, to see the traction, that depending on the size of your business, this may take multi-months to really firmly get in place. What is that range of time that an entrepreneur would look and say, okay, it's going to take us X amount of time to get this fully implemented throughout our organization?
Great question. Thank you. So one thing that EOS isn't, it's not a seminar. Hey, where we go to a one-day seminar and hey, you got it all figured out. It's a 2-year implementation. And so starting with the leadership team initially, but our typical engagement is it's a 2-year implementation. Now there's teams that stay with us. I've got clients that have been 7, 8 year clients because they don't want to run those quarterly sessions that we have after initial implementation. We have the quarterly session every 90 days and a 2-day annual planning session. So they don't want to do that. They want to do what they do. If I have a CertaPro franchise, I want to do what I do. I don't want to come in and run an EOS quarterly meeting. But it's designed so that we, in that 2-year period, we teach all the tools, even the tools in the toolbox in the leadership team training manual that we use. We teach them all those tools, get them mastering those tools. And sometimes teams are ready to take on their own implementation at that point. And that's what it's designed to do is after 2 years, hey, you got this. I'm always here if you need me. You want to follow up with, ask me any questions, an unlimited amount of time. But then after 2 years, the idea is they got it.
Greg, I got to say, after 3 days with Michael Alasso, I came to learn that I thought at that time, and I still think so, that you were smart and you were articulate and you were caring and you had just some magnetism to how you held yourself. People just wanted to be in your presence. And I just feel so fortunate to have had you on the podcast. And you've been so generous with all these tools and all the knowledge. And when you talked about just a law of abundance and just giving it away and believing in what goes around comes around, much appreciated. If people want more of you, how could they go about doing that?
Well, thanks for your kind words, Rich. You're a nice man. A couple of ways they could email me if they prefer that. They could email me at craig.andrews@eosworldwide.com. And they could also look at my website, which is www.eosworldwide.com/Craig-Andrews. So it's that's my microsite at EOS Worldwide. So they could certainly go there, drop me a quick note. If somebody wants some of those foundational tools, I'll send those to you as well, Rich, and I'll send you that article, John, on that Pat Lencioni wrote. And I'll make sure I email those to you, but I'm happy to share any of that information and generously give and answer any questions that I can for any of your listeners.
Thank you so much for being on with us today.
Thank you.
Please stick around for a few more minutes while Rich and I break down this episode.
John, I really love how each of the 6 components mapped over to a tool. I think it's just so much easier when there's a tool, something tangible, if it's a worksheet, if it anything, a methodology, here are the components, here's the tool, we're going to give it away. If you want advice on how to use it, call us. I think that is just so sound of a practice, and it really does follow that law of abundance where they're just giving it away to be helpful. If you want help on how to use it, yeah, then pay us, but we'll give you the tools.
Yeah, but there's also a little secret in that, which is this. An organization that already exists, which for the most part, I'm sure EOS gets implemented into already existing organizations seeking a solution. Maybe if you've heard of it in a different business, you bring it to your startup. But in most cases, I'm sure the EOS is being looked at as a system to be implemented already in an ecosystem of systems and people and cultures and core values and potentially competing interests and a whole bunch of different things. So for somebody in the organization, even if it was the CEO or one of the vice presidents, to download some tools from EOS Worldwide and say, hey, team, we're now going to implement this new thing that hypothetically they're not fully trained on, trying to push that into an organization would be very difficult, in my opinion, which is where having a certified or expert EOS practitioner, if you will, implementer, who can come in just exactly like Craig said, a servant leader. I have a dry erase board and a marker, but I don't know anything about your business. All I know is there's a system out there that can help your business achieve exactly what you guys are trying to achieve. So let me help you, right? Help me help you, to the Jerry Maguire, come up with this. But that expert, that person from out of town who's not involved in your business becomes the servant leader who can help them implement this. I don't see this being implemented very well unless you have cohesiveness throughout the entire organization going, yes, I want to be held accountable to a scorecard. Let's implement that. Because quite honestly, the biggest thing he said, which is where I see friction being created, is when you implement this, there's no place to hide. And sometimes people get too comfortable and they like to hide a little bit.
Yeah. It's interesting you bring up friction. It's almost, is that another component? When you have traction, you can't have traction without a little bit of friction.
True.
I can see that potentially being a thing. This reminds me of the podcast we recently did with Bessie Graham, where she talked about having heuristics, which she called thinking tools. I wouldn't have put this together without that podcast, but it's almost like that's what Craig does. He has thinking tools for how to approach the business. And the thinking tools are like the VTO, the accountability chart, the scorecard. Like these are all tools. He doesn't need to know a lot about the person's business because he has the heuristics on how to approach business.
Hmm. Yeah, 100%. To me, the tools piece. And I want to dive into these because I know in our companies, we have a different model for this. And I'm sure there are many others, right? We're doing a model, EOS is a model. There's other models out there of how to put these together. What I've heard about EOS though, and I love about EOS, which I think combines the components of their program with the thinking tools that you've articulated, with the training of not only how to use the tools, but I was going to ask this question. I just made an assumption, but I'm assuming that an EOS implementer is also teaching an organization, training an organization how to address conflict in a healthy and effective manner as well. That has to be part of the process because otherwise people will be throwing rocks at each other in the conflict room, right? There's a deeper level to this that goes beyond the tools that I think EOS brings to it. Whereas some other programs I've seen are more like, here's the form you need to use. There's the Rockefeller Habits model. There's the business canvas that we've talked about in other episodes. There are other different models. I think EOS has done a fantastic job of taking it to the next level. We also had another guest, Rich, you may recall, Eric Dodier, who was formerly with a company called Pixel Media. The company's been rebranded now to Rafter One, and he swears by it. When he was able to implement EOS into his organization, and I'm pretty sure he had an implementer, he told us, everything started changing and started getting a lot easier and clearer for him as the business owner to have that in his business. Certainly something people should be looking into. And before I throw this back over to you, where we started is so critical. How can you design a plan for your business if you don't know what your personal goals are in life as a person?
Yeah, how accurate is that? Agreed. You've got to start with what do you want, and then what do you want out of the business, and then what do your people want, and what do they want? How do they get that out of the business? I'd also agree with you on making an assumption that part of EOS is how to have that healthy conflict. Because I look at my notes when he talked about healthy, it was open, honest, discipline, and accountability. And he had several nods to Pat Lencioni. And as we know, Pat Lencioni wrote The Five Dysfunctions of a Team. The second part of that pyramid up is conflict. And the first base of it is trust. Yep. And how to develop trust. So I'm with you on the kind of assumption that they will work with the team on how to develop trust so they can have healthy conflict that then leads to commitment and accountability and ultimately results. Yeah, really enjoyed this conversation with Craig. I'm happy to, I think, have done a good job at the Michael Alasso retreat and pulled in a good one and created a great relationship that I think is going to be mutually beneficial for years to come.